Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
You can hear me. I don't think you can see me at the moment, can you? Can you hear me during the adverts? Have they set up the studio in such a way that some unknown entity somewhere is tuning into the exchanges between me and the production team that unfold when you're listening to adverts and travel news? I don't know. I told you a moment ago about my friend's mum. She's ahead of the game. She's got a little sticker, a little elastoplast actually, over the aperture on her laptop computer. And while we all sort of queued up to laugh at her, someone else pointed out that Mark Zuckerberg does exactly the same thing. If you'd founded Facebook, it's fair to say that you probably have a slightly better understanding of the cyber world than the rest of us do. But equally, my friend's mum not exactly Mark Zuckerberg. I don't imagine there are industrial secrets that could yield untold riches to people who manage to spy on her. But why is Mark Zuckerberg covering his? What did he know that we didn't? And why am I talking about this? Well, the answer is relatively simple. You probably know by now that the WikiLeaks organisation, which has effectively become the intelligence arm of Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump's double act, the WikiLeaks organisation has published a bunch of files of computer code, which you kind of have to trust them on this unless you speak fluent computer code. They say reveals the CIA's most closely guarded secret cyber weapons. It's a great phrase. The most closely guarded secret cyber weapons. Try saying that when you've had a few drinks. And to put that into layman's terms, it kind of explains how they hack our tellies. There you go. That's about as layman as it's going to get. It kind of explains how they manage to turn our tellies into cameras. I don't know whether my telly has got a camera in it. I guess I don't. I'm one of those people whose technology, probably I possess technology capable of running a small moon mission, but all I ever really use it for is you know, you've got a laptop that could probably power a small spaceship, and all you really use it for is email and browsing the internet. We're all the same like that, aren't we? There must be one house somewhere where everything is absolutely powered up to the max. So your telly's talking to your Hoover, and your Hoover's talking to your fridge, and your fridge is talking to your central heating, and your central heating's talking to you, and it just goes on like that, and you press a button. I've got that thing with Sky where if I'm watching it in one room, I can stop it and then go into the other room and start watching the same program again. But you're listening to a man who still plays with his mobile phone thumbprint recognition thing as a toy. I still find it astonishing that it reads my thumbprint on my iPhone and opens it up. Even, and this is pretty sad actually, I'm only 45, but even the touch payment things in shops, I still occasionally pause and pretend that I'm Captain Kirk out of Star Trek, paying for stuff just by touching things instead of having to punch in numbers or take money out of your pocket. You can get on the tube. And you see now some people use their watch. They use their watch to activate their train ticket. Man alive! We're living in the future. It's fantastic. All that's missing is hoverboards, but they can't be far away. And what about those pills you could eat instead of ever having a meal? And in fact, while we're on about it, why don't they bring Tomorrow's World back? That's the kind of show we need more of at the time. We might have seen this coming if we'd had more Tomorrow's World. And British spies are involved. So, right, conspiracy theory number one. We tried to get a guest on earlier this week, because we'd heard him on another radio station, to talk to us about the 13 terror attacks that the intelligence services revealed that they had foiled since, I think, 2013 or 14. And they wouldn't come on and talk to us, which was a bit odd, given that it seemed like a really good story. But I just wonder now whether they were kind of getting their retaliation in first, whether they knew this story was coming. Presumably, I don't know a lot about hacking. If you do, you're probably going to have to help me out at some point in the next hour. Presumably, the CIA would have known that they'd been hacked. They would at least have had some inkling that something might be around the corner. One thinks of Chelsea Manning, or Bradley as she was, when she came to prominence for passing stuff to WikiLeaks, and Edward Snowden, of course, currently shacked up in Russia. So presumably they feared, or even predicted that there was another massive publication on the way, and got their retaliation in early by saying, look, we are the spies and we have foiled, count them, I think it was 13, I might be wrong, lots and lots and lots of terror attacks. And you kind of believe them. Of course you do. Even in the absence of proof, it seems a very odd thing to fib about. But if they did that knowing that this was around the corner, then you know why they did it. They were kind of saying, yeah, all right, busted, but we have to do this sort of stuff to foil terror attacks. And then you look at the weird intervention by Donald Trump about Barack Obama allegedly illegally tapping his phone, and you start learning a little bit about how the American intelligence services work, and if indeed Donald Trump's phone at Trump Tower was in any way accessed by the authorities, it wouldn't have been illegally, 99% certainty. I acknowledge the existence of the 1%, but 99% certainty it wouldn't have been illegal. What it means is that a federal judge would have been presented with enough evidence to persuade him that security services should be allowed to listen to Donald Trump's phone calls. And the only circumstances in which a federal judge would allow that to happen is if they believed he was either colluding with a foreign power or engaged in behavior that was detrimental to the welfare of the United States of America. So that's why that was such a weird intervention. But it made you realize, or at least it made me realize, where some of the lines are on this. Because if the authorities possess the ability to hack a phone or a telly or a tablet or whatever it may be, I hope you don't think I'm mad or naive when I say that in and of itself doesn't unduly spook me. See what I did there? Pun of the week. It doesn't unduly spook me. You kind of realise that technology advances only a nanosecond ahead of the people who seek to subvert the technology. It's like people who, to talk in old money for a moment, it's like people who love taking things apart and putting them back together. They often end up possessed of such a skill set that they put things back together in a way that makes the machinery slightly superior to how it was before. You know, people do it with cars, don't they? Mechanics do it with cars. You soup up a car. Some people do the same with technology. They love it. They love it. They love to find the back doors. They love to find the booby traps. And that's what this, as I understand it, and actually I should give you permission right now to ring in and slap me over the knuckles if I'm just misrepresenting the technology, because this is a very amateurish analysis. But if I understand it correctly, what has been revealed is the kind of bugs, almost the flaws, the slight little, what you could describe as an open window in the computer programs that allow the security services to get into the equipment and potentially therefore use it to keep an eye on us. That knowledge doesn't frighten me, because it would frighten me if it was in the hands of criminals or blackmailers or something like that. That's what my friend's mum is worried about, I think, getting blackmailed for whatever it is she does when she's got her laptop open and her little elastoplast over the camera. But I think if you live in a society, you have to scrutinise the intelligence services, but you also have to have a degree of trust. You have to. Otherwise, you end up going down the route of thinking there's no difference between Vladimir Putin and our liberal democracies. A lot of people going down that route, but it's madness. So you have to have a degree of trust for the intelligence services, which means that if they wanted to flick the switch and access this sort of information, you presume there would be checks and balances that they would have to go through. In other words, yeah, you might be able to hack Donald Trump's phone, but only if you've got permission from a federal judge. You might be able to watch my sitting room through my television, but only if you'd got permission from a judge who had decided that I did pose a significant potential threat to national security and therefore you should spy on me. During the investigation into Stephen Lawrence's murder, I'm 99% sure I remember watching them having chats in their flats, which means that the police even then were capable of getting cameras into the homes of suspects that the suspects didn't know about. I'm 99% certain on that. And the upshot of that is, who watches the watchers? Now, I don't know what the biggest thing is you've changed your mind about politically over the years. I guess, the closer you are to the Brexit-Trump access, the less likely it is you've ever changed your mind about anything. But for me, one of the biggest is the if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear argument, which I used to subscribe to with great enthusiasm. I really did. It seemed to me that as a peace-loving, law-abiding citizen, I was comfortable if the authorities had the power to read my emails because they'd never find anything interesting in them. I used to laugh at people who told me they don't like travelling on the London... Actually, I still laugh at people who don't like travelling on the London Underground using an Oyster card because they don't want, quotes, them, end quotes, to know where you're going. And it is highly unlikely that the authorities are going to be remotely interested in the contents of my friend's mum's laptop. So if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. And then I had a... what would you describe it as? I don't know, but a penny drop moment of sorts, but it was theoretical. So somebody explained to me that the reason why you have to resist too much scrutiny, the reason why you shouldn't sacrifice your civil liberties on the altar of your freedoms, or you shouldn't sacrifice your freedoms on the altar of your security, there's a clever quote about that, meaning that you lose both in the end and it's a stupid thing to do. You shouldn't do that because what you're doing... And my God, this must be the most timely observation I've made in a long time, because what you're doing is presuming that the world will stay the same. So if I say now that Gordon Brown, David Cameron, Theresa May didn't lead governments that seemed to me to pose any material threat to civil liberties, right? You can disagree with that, but generally speaking, it's not like we live in Russia or Turkey. But look what's happened in America. Look what's happened in America. Donald Trump targeting journalists, describing them as enemies of the people. That's sort of, hopefully, just the foothills of totalitarianism, and he'll stay there. But imagine if he goes higher and starts doing what they've done in Turkey, where they're locking up journalists. They're locking up activists. They're locking up people whose political opinions they don't like. In this country at the moment, if you dare to express a political opinion that Paul Dacre doesn't like, you get rubbished and lampooned by Quentin Letts in the pages of the Daily Mail. But remember, if you're a High Court judge, you also get called an enemy of the people. If you're John Major, you also get called treacherous. If that mindset makes its way into government, then somebody somewhere puts their hand up and says, can we find proof that this person is an enemy of the people? Can we find proof that this person is treacherous, even though they may be incredibly loyal to ancient British traditions like, I don't know, the sovereignty of Parliament, the House of Lords, the primacy of law, all of those things? You're incredibly loyal to the most ancient British traditions of all, but in this weird political morass that we found ourselves in now, you become a traitor and an enemy of the people. Imagine if Paul Dacre's worldview actually operated within Downing Street, rather than Downing Street just being in thrall to the editor of the Daily Mail and living in constant terror of his disapproval. Imagine if that worldview actually pulled strings. I think you don't have to be completely paranoid to suggest it wouldn't be long before they were hacking Michael Heseltine's television to keep an eye on him, try and find proof that he was an enemy of the people, listening into John Major's conversations, going after High Court judges. And history suggests those are precisely the kind of people that totalitarian regimes target first. Sounding weird? Sounding paranoid? Okay. Well, you've got a president in the United States of America who'll lie about almost anything with absolute impunity at the moment, and the people who can call him up for those lies, the intelligence services and the journalists, both already described by him as enemies and somehow being against him. Tell me that's not frightening. Of course it is. So where are we going with this? Simple. They're watching us, or at least they have the potential to watch us. I used to think that was fine because I've got nothing to hide. I now find it slightly terrifying, because what if we end up with a government like Donald Trump's or President Erdogan's in Turkey? What if we sit here calmly, waving through this sort of knowledge, going, yeah, but they've solved 13 terror attacks in the last 2 years. It's great that they can watch people. What if we just sit here calmly allowing this epic amount of surveillance to be undertaken of us, and we wake up 10 years down the line and we're living in a country that has got a leader who thinks that all dissent should be silenced, who thinks that all people who disagree with him politically are traitors or enemies of the people? What if we wake up and, given what's happened in Britain and America in the last year, it's no longer a pie-in-the-sky speculation, this. Our fellow citizens, our neighbours and friends might well elect a complete madman. And if they do, and that madman seeks to secure his position, protect his position in the traditional ways, the more powers the security services have to watch you right now, the more likely they are to use those powers, potentially 10 years down the line, to lock you up or get you into trouble or prove that you're an enemy of the people. On a scale of 1 to 10, how mad am I sounding? That's today's topic. 03456060973. Obviously, I'd like you to make a slightly more serious point than just ring me up with a number. But that's why, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear, it doesn't work anymore, isn't it? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. And we haven't even mentioned Orwell. The idea that the security services have the power to watch us in our own sitting rooms would not have frightened me too much 10 years ago because, you know, apart from the very occasional outbreak of romance, there's nothing that happens in my sitting room that I would be embarrassed by. Not really. Today, having seen Donald Trump get elected in America, President Erdogan lock up journalists and political opponents in Turkey, a relatively liberal democracy, today it frightens the bejesus out of me. And we haven't even mentioned George Orwell. Zach's in Greenwich. Zach, what do you reckon?
Hi, James. I think you're not sounding crazy, and
well, we might both be.
Really goes, possibly. The rabbit hole goes a lot deeper when you think. I've just made an observation myself, so let me explain it. Bear with me for a second. So, let's say Donald Trump or Theresa May or whoever, the assumption is they've got nothing to hide. But what if they do have something to hide? Then who holds the powers of the strings of power? Do you understand my point?
Absolutely not. No, sorry.
The assumption is that the security services are whiter than white. Okay, so let's say I'm Donald Trump and I've got something to hide, and if this is found out, then my whole political career will go down the drain. Would I be influenced in my policies and my decision making if somebody was to blackmail me because they was able to look into my private affairs?
Well, I mean, it's a rhetorical question, and of course there is that dossier, unsubstantiated allegations of involvement with Russian prostitutes and the like, which I suppose you could cite as something that you could use to blackmail somebody in power. And historically, the Cambridge spies' homosexuality was something that, of course, was illegal at the time and possibly exposed them to the possibility of blackmail and bribery. But I don't quite understand why you've brought this to the table so early when we're really just wondering about ourselves. I'm worried about what a possible future leader might do in my own country with the ability to watch me in my own home. Okay,
so what I'm saying to you is, these are the things we know about them. What about what we don't know about them, and how much is policy? Okay, how much is Donald Trump's policies influenced by a potential blackmail? I know this is all conspiracy and whatnot, but
no, it's all right, mate. I mean, you crack on, but I just want to steer the conversation back to the central question that we're asking, which is whether or not we now, as a society, recognise that if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear, is an absolutely bogus and deeply, deeply dangerous slogan. And it was Benjamin Franklin, I think. In fact, I know it was because so many of you got in touch to tell me. Benjamin Franklin, who observed that if you are prepared, and I won't get the quote exactly right, but if you were prepared to sacrifice your freedoms, your civil liberties on the altar of your security, then you deserve neither. I do, however, have some support. Well, that's why I go with the FISA stuff, with the Trump taps. If his phone was tapped, it would have been with the approval of a federal judge. So I want to live in a country where the authorities, the services, even the secret ones, have to go through legal hoops in order to watch me, like they did, I'm 99% sure, with the suspects in the Stephen Lawrence murder case. Jack's in Sutton. Jack, what would you like to say?
Hey, James. Thanks for having me on. Basically, I just wanted to kind of draw a comparison, I'm surprised no one's done this already, to George Orwell's book 1984. I think you can probably draw the similarities between the telescreen in 1984 and the current.
Well, for people who haven't read it or indeed seen the excellent film with John Hurt starring as O'Brien, the telescreen watches you. So in the very first chapter of 1984, when Winston Smith, I don't think this counts as a spoiler, does it, Axel? Winston Smith starts keeping a diary, which is illegal. Keeping a diary is illegal. I think writing things down is illegal, isn't it, in the privacy of your own home? And for some reason, his apartment is designed in such a way that there's a tiny little alcove which is not viewable from the perspective of the telescreen that's on the wall. And that's where he starts writing his diary. So, yeah, I think for once the Orwellian parallel here is pertinent, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, Orwellian, the kind of thing is overused nowadays. I think a lot of Guardian journalists seem to use it a lot. But I just draw the comparison. You said earlier on about the terror attacks they've somewhat presented, and they didn't want to come and speak to you on the radio about it. But you could draw the comparison between East Asia and I can't remember the other enemy that they're
Oceania.
changing the battle against. Yeah, I think that's the one. And they're kind of trying to unite us against this common enemy of kind of thing. And they're kind of in the book where
I get you, but I don't think they are. I think the intelligence services, oddly, this is part of the reason Donald Trump doesn't like them. The intelligence services in America undermine his attempts to terrorize the nation and get them all so frightened, and doing the work of the terrorists for them by getting them all so frightened of a massively exaggerated threat that he's allowed to bring in incredibly oppressive rules. I hope the intelligence services are working against that. But of course there's a possible future, especially if somebody like him is able to purge, which is a word a Republican congressperson used yesterday, purge the services and replace them with loyalists, then yeah, we've got a whole world of problems.
I mean, everyone talks about nowadays is kind of post-truth politics, and I'd even draw it back as far as the kind of post-9/11 kind of politics we're in now, where we kind of seem to have forgotten the whole of history when we talk about the kind of context in which we live now. I think in 1984, again, they talk about this kind of party idea when no one within the party is really at the top of what's going on. It's kind of this is kind of never-ending kind of continuous idea. I don't think you could argue that about today's society. I mean, the dominant political kind of theory at the moment would be neoliberalism, and that's kind of been dominant since Thatcher and Reagan in the 70s and 80s. I think the CIA are scared a little bit, and the tendency is that they're kind of losing grip a bit. I mean, Trump's quite outspoken against the intelligence agencies. I mean, I don't know. I'm surprised that anyone trusts them anyway. I agree, like you said earlier, that you need an intelligence agency and have to trust them somewhat. But I think you have to take the
people in secret doing things, unspeakable things to keep us all safe is actually true. However, when they get found out, this is what's so horrible about Paul Marine's case, when they get found out doing things that break all the rules, even though tacitly and implicitly and somewhat reluctantly we might think, yeah, I don't have a problem with what he did. If you get caught breaking the rules so egregiously, then something has to kick in. The system has to kick in. But otherwise, you're right. I mean, obviously, they've got problems. Smartphones controlled remotely. Malware can be used to hack computers. Television could be turned into a covert listening device. Digital control system could be hijacked on your car. At risk of making light of this subject, do you reckon you've ever been hacked in this way? 0345 6060 973. My laptop asks for my password twice sometimes. You know, when you log onto your laptop, it asks for my password and I press OK, and then it goes back to the password screen again, and I have to enter my password again. Ooh. It's 10:30. The security services can watch you in your own home, it would appear. The leaks provided by WikiLeaks with regard to the CIA and British security services are implicated as well. They apparently helped develop the technology that allows the CIA to create so-called spy TVs. And just coming at it from the nothing to hide, nothing to fear angle, and pointing out that recent events in the world suggest that even though you might not have anything to fear from the regime you currently live under, who knows what sort of regime you'll be living under 10 years hence. I'm going to mention Israel now, which will prompt, no doubt, the usual flurry of uncomprehending and unthinking and deliberately obtuse complaints. But Israel has just introduced legislation that bars anybody from a foreign country who has criticised their policies to the extent of supporting a boycott of goods from Israel or its settlements are now banned from entering the country, which possibly would include Jeremy Corbyn, actually, being banned from entering Israel. This has been passed in the Knesset. So far, so simple to understand. But what's the next stage on that ladder? There are plenty of Israelis who have a problem with the settlements. There are even Israelis who support the BDS movement. What happens to them next? If you're banning foreigners from coming into the country for holding an opinion, what happens to that allegedly, supposedly, ostensibly toxic opinion when it's held by citizens of the actual state? Okay, I won't tell anyone. I'll keep quiet. I'll just do my shopping without making any big political announcements. Yeah, but what if you're having a conversation with your wife in front of your telly about how you're a loyal Israeli, but you don't think you can buy any more stuff that was made in the settlements, in the illegally occupied parts of that corner of the world? Boom. They've got you. That's why it's frightening, right? Again, I'm coming back, aren't I, to the question of how mad I'm sounding on a scale of 1 to 10. 0345 606 0973. Could you, for example, imagine Donald Trump's reaction to evidence that prominent public figures had been filmed at a dinner party mocking, laughing and swapping stories about his inappropriate behaviour towards women? What would he do with that information? Would he laugh it off? Does he seem like a man to you who can laugh anything off? 10:37. Matt is in Edinburgh. Matt, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. First time calling.
Good.
Thank you for accepting the call. So, yeah, I felt compelled to call about this because this is absolutely terrifying. I'm doing a PhD in computer science, and my background is in all of this. And these devices that listen to everything that you're saying, they absolutely terrify me. So the Samsung TVs, this isn't new. I mean, 2 years ago, they were pulled up on this. And in the terms of conditions of use, they were basically saying that the smart TVs will record what you say and we reserve the right to send this off to third parties.
So this is the T&Cs. My friend Wayne keeps banging on about reading the terms and conditions, even on apps.
Yeah.
When you sign, because you never do. You just click the box. Well, I hope everyone else does what I do. You just click the box and get your kit, don't you? You never read 87 pages of small print.
You do, but this is the same thing as like on an iPhone with Siri or on Google with OK Google. The way these things work is they have to constantly be listening to what you're saying, and they wait to find.
You're so right. How are we so stupid? You're so right.
But then the problem is when you think about it, right? It's like these are magnificent computers, right? But they're not that good. They can't really do all the inference based on the question that you ask after. What they actually do is they just listen for this little bit, like Alexa, do this, or Siri, do this. OK Google, do this, and then the following part gets sent off to a remote server. That might be in the EU, that might be in the US, you don't know. And then there's a load of number crunching that happens, and it compiles it and sends it back down. So if you think about it, all you have to do is circumvent this point that the recording loop isn't just for OK Google or Siri.
Are you telling me that there's not? It's when you say OK Google or you say Siri, and your phone talks back to you. You're telling me there's not some sort of magic button that I've pressed invisibly?
It depends on the query, right? If it's something that it can answer, like Siri, lock my phone, then it's going to do that. If you ask it anything else, or if it's unsure in any way, it's going to delegate up to the service, right? I mean, Apple has huge machine learning data.
You're just right. It's amazing. There's stuff we never think about.
It's like a TV, especially like an older TV, does not have the processing power nor the memory to actually compute anything. When you say like change channel, well, maybe for that we'll do. But if you're asking it to do more complex things, of course, you have this thing that's constantly recording and analyzing what you're saying and sending it out of your house. And the second you sent it out of your house, you have no control over it anymore. And how trivial is it to just flip the switch remotely if you've got some of the best hackers in the world actually just going in and modifying the code, with the little injections?
Yeah, but if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear?
That's such a ridiculous statement. I can't believe it. It's like people that say that don't realize exactly what's going on. I mean, you might have things to hide that you don't even know about.
Or that don't need to be hidden today, but my God, you're going to have to hide them tomorrow.
Exactly. And I mean, this is kind of tinfoil hat stuff, but Google, they just need 3 clicks from you to make a really strong assessment as the kind of person you are. I mean, 3 clicks and they can target adverts to you. Fine. They basically build a statistically sound model of you. I think it was in 2013, some more research came out that Facebook, with over 88% accuracy, could predict what your sexual orientation was, whether or not you were out or not, just from your likes.
We're shaking it all about.
When you have this data and then you have a regime that comes in, I mean, we don't have to look too far back in Europe's history to see what Nazi Germany used.
Oh, no, not even Nazi Germany. I'd go with the Stasi, actually. I'd go post-war East Germany, and the fact that neighbours were informing on each other and the walls had ears, but they were human ears.
Yeah.
Now they're not. I mean, they're electric ears and they're everywhere.
No, anyway, this whole thing absolutely terrifies me.
What do you do then? Can I ask? I mean, do you do anything?
I have nothing like Alexa or anything in my home. OK Google is.
I don't even know whether I do or not. My phone occasionally talks to me. I don't understand why. That's because I've said something that makes me think that makes my phone think I'm talking to my phone. Stop laughing at me, Axel. That's why, right?
Covers and everything. I mean, it's like Do
you cover the cameras on your laptop?
Yeah, of course. I have little slidey proper covers, and I did it on my girlfriend's equipment as well. I mean, it's like I've already seen proof of concept where they're able to activate the camera on a Mac without the light going off, for example, right? Saying that it's on. I mean, this is already demonstrably possible.
Oh, God.
And when you hear that, like, security services, etc., have to leave smartphones and tablets outside the meeting room. I mean, you're talking about smartphones and tablets which are mostly American designed and like strong allies, and they still have to be let outside the room, right? Because you can't guarantee the security of them.
It's got nothing to hide. You've got nothing to fear. And now people right across the country are thinking even about stuff they wouldn't want their partners to see that they've been doing in front of their laptop screen. So let alone the authorities. And I just want to give a quick mention to Suzanne, who's made me chuckle while you were making me feel a cold and very, very real terror, Matt. Suzanne's been in touch to say, I'm now paranoid that I'm being watched while answering at Mr. James O'B out loud when listening to him in my kitchen.
Yeah, no, it is scary. And
okay. I mean, look, we're speculating slightly on a future sinister employment.
No, I don't think we are, James, because right now I don't know if the case is finished, but I know that US prosecutors are subpoenaing Amazon in the US at the moment to release recordings gathered from Alexa with relation to a murder case, right?
This is Amazon Echo, isn't it?
That's it. Alexa. Is that it? The Echo?
I think so, yeah.
So,
boom.
I mean, whether that's a phishing expedition or whether they know something, I mean, we don't know, right? But then if you could compromise this device, which is specifically connected to the internet, that has no input and is just constantly listening to what you're saying, I mean, you can't think that has that much processing power. Of course, it's going to delegate everything. And I think Amazon are hoping to set a precedent that they aren't obliged to do this for now and in the future. But, I mean, I wouldn't put much faith in that. And there was one other point that I wanted to say.
I don't like you. I don't like you at all. You're frightening.
Okay.
You're frightening me.
People don't.
Of course I do. It's the knowledge.
The other thing, no, I'm joking. The other thing is this whole kind of, it's okay for the security services to have access to kind of circumvent encryption, etc.
Yeah.
Because I would rather have that than, have a terrorist attack,
yes.
etc., which is a very fair thing to say.
Yes.
But the way that security works is that if you put a chink in the armor and you say, it's okay, only the good guys are going to know about it and they're going to do it. I mean, that's ridiculous. You're basically saying you build a fortress with this tiny little weak spot that only we know about and the bad guys are never going to find it. All you've done is you've created a new point of entry for them.
I think this might be the most frightening phone call I've ever taken, and you sound like such a sort of cheerful, clever chap. Right? It's slightly unnerving. So we have sort of sleepwalked into a scenario where pretty much every home in this country could, at the flick of a switch, be broadcast on the big screens in the middle of Piccadilly Circus.
I mean, I don't know about the actual technical implementation of that, but I guess. I mean,
Mate, I'm a journalist. You're a PhD student. Obviously, I'm going for the headline.
We live in the panopticon, definitely, and as long as you're aware of that and you accept the trade-offs of it, it's fine. But I do think that most people don't really understand.
So what do I need to do at home tonight? I mean, imagine I did ever do anything embarrassing.
It depends how much you want to embrace the tinfoil hat lifestyle, right? If it's not affecting you at the moment, then fair enough. But when you see kind of people being randomly excluded from going to countries despite having authorization, not naming any names, you have to wonder, well, what was the basis for that?
Where do they get the information from? What are they looking at? But this is okay then. I mean, actually, I'm late for the travel, and I've made a New Year's resolution that I wouldn't be, and I have yet to keep it on a single day. Matt, never call me again. It's 10:45. Okay, Google. Possibly some people's phones just came on then. Siri. I don't know if this is going to fry your head quite as much as it's frying mine, because I am a curious mixture of ardent enthusiast for new technologies and Luddite. But that call there from Matt in Edinburgh, I've forgotten what his PhD was in, but it was associated to this subject matter. Everything he said was shocking and yet so plausible. It's all true. We're carrying around listening devices in our pockets. We've got whopping great cameras fixed to the walls in our sitting rooms and televisions. We've got laptop computers that if you can see into, somebody somewhere, the technology exists to ensure they can see out of. 0345 606 0973 is the number you call. If I'm sounding discombobulated, it's because I am. Like, genuinely discombobulated. Not because the CIA can see my porn folder, Emma. I don't even know what one of those is. But obviously, the fear that you could be surveilled and that a regime in the not too distant future might be looking for evidence of dissent. I'm using Israel as an example. I'm using Turkey as an example. And I'm going to use Donald Trump as an example, because if I said to you that he was keen to outlaw the wearing of red socks, you'd probably believe me now. The bonkers scale has gone so far to the right. Whoa. So what question do we ask next? Has it happened to you? What precautions do you take? And actually, the biggest question of all, I've only got 2 phone lines free. Oh, they've just gone. But I'll try and free up a phone. That was weird. That I literally, as I said, free, the two gaps in the switchboard lit up instantaneously. That's not a coincidence, is it? And of course, yeah, and it did. People did. Their computers just came on. When I said, "Okay, good, well done, James," it just came on. Google just came on. That doesn't mean anything, but I'm just reminding you how close to the surface this stuff is. And yet we're not really, I don't know what the word is, sufficiently concerned, sufficiently informed, sufficiently scared. So what's the question? Why aren't you scared? I'll free up some phone. Is anyone ringing in to say that? I don't think they are anymore. Remember when we used to hear radio hosts, even like me, saying, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. I remember the caller that changed my mind. So I said, okay, if you're happy to have someone reading your emails, would you let them just come into your house and go through your drawers whenever they feel like it? Or what about reading old letters? Would you be as calm? Because emails are usually boring stuff. We don't think of them in the same way that we do love letters or letters from a dead relative. Mark's in Derby. Cheer me up, Mark.
Hi, James. How's it going? Great show.
You're very kind. What's on your mind?
I'm sort of making more paranoid about the
oh,
tech
great. That's just what we need.
Cars and items.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a very modern German car. Obviously, it's loaded full of the technology. And just before Christmas, myself and my wife were coming back out of Manchester, and all of a sudden, my wife said to me, "Look at your analog clock in the middle of your car. It was going backwards, going forwards. The digital numbers on the car were going up and down."
Do you drive a DeLorean?
No. It's a V and a W.
Okay.
To modern car, any case, and so I told VW, took the car into them, and they said, "Well, what was the problem with the car?"
Yeah.
He said, "Well, it's nothing. It was just a data update." Now, bearing in mind the fact that this car can run on lasers, so it's laser guided cruise control, so it can brake, accelerate, stop, all remotely. It's quite concerning, the fact that obviously that can be done.
God, yeah. I thought you were being a bit bonkers when you started. Yeah, because they can access.
Well,
your clock using the internet. Oh, mate, I'm sounding so stupid now. But why can't they access your brakes? Is what you're saying, or your accelerator?
Okay, it does work for the safety precautions. It does help you, but I'm coming up to a roundabout and somebody's cut me as I'm approaching the roundabout. The car's going straight across in front of me, and I've got my foot over the brake anyway because I'm on cruise control, and the car's activated the seat belts. I had the brakes on, put the alarm on, more or less stop the car. But, it's the fact that, obviously, all this technology, people think it's great, it's a lovely car, but the thing is, it's just a date update, James, that's all I say.
But it's so, when you put it like that, it's as if we're all stupid. Of course it's two-way traffic. Of course if they can send stuff to you can send stuff to them. And of course if you can do it without asking for it, they can get it without seeking your permission, whoever they are.
The thing is, James, right, on my car, to activate that cruise control, which is great because it does it all for you, makes it simple in traffic, it's brilliant. But it's all I do to activate is I press two buttons on the steering wheel, and it's activated.
You're coming in and out of zone, but you're absolutely right. I thought you were going to be a bit tinfoil hatty, Mark, when you started talking, but actually, oh my God, the tinfoil hats were right. Gary's in Catford. Gary, what would you like to say?
Do you know your head size, James?
Enormous.
Well,
hang on, metaphorical or physical? They're both pretty big, but metaphorically it's even bigger than physically.
It's just I need to know how much tinfoil to send you in the post.
You're here to tell me why I shouldn't be scared.
Well, I'm here to tell you that we just need to calm down a bit. You buy these things because they are technologically great, and I'm like you. I think you put it perfectly. You're technologically interested, but you're a Luddite.
Yeah.
I still click my fingers when I go towards an automatic door because I love the fact that it opens as I click my fingers.
Yeah.
I think.
I hold the palm of my hand up.
Oh, brilliant. The force is with you.
Well, the kids love it as well.
Yeah, that's right. But you buy these things because you have an interest in this technology. You don't have to. If you don't want a television that's got a camera in it, don't buy it. And actually, a lot of this stuff where it says that there's a camera inside your television, I think is perpetrated by either the company that sell them or it's the hackers, not the government, that make you want to be scared. I don't think you should be scared. I don't quite subscribe to the if you've got nothing to hide, there's nothing to worry about. But there are so many checks and balances in place in government that you shouldn't be worried unless.
But there aren't. That's what WikiLeaks has. I mean, before he got into bed with Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, that was why people liked WikiLeaks. It appeared to be empowering ordinary citizens against surveillance. Edward Snowden, certainly, we didn't know this stuff was going on. Angela Merkel didn't know that the CIA were listening to her phone calls or had the potential to listen to her phone calls. There's checks and balances up to a point. But not only have we got a president in the United States now who thinks anybody who tells the truth he doesn't like is an enemy of the country, an enemy of the regime, you've got security services who are kind of trying to juggle about 8 balls at once. And just to add to that, someone sent me a story from Wired, which is a reputable organ, detailing a story where hackers could kill a car at 70 miles an hour travelling on the highway. They could just slam the brakes on. And you say I shouldn't be scared?
I say you shouldn't worry as much because...
Well, I'm not that worried. I've only been aware of it for half an hour, mate. He's hardly kept me awake at night. I haven't been to bed yet. But are you not worried that Mark's driving home from Manchester to Derby and they get some data out? If it was someone who meant him harm. And I will say again, and maybe it's only me that cares about this because of what I do for a living and the kind of attention I'm attracting at the moment. But if you are speaking truth to power about Trump, about Brexit, about whatever it may be, and getting turned over by the Daily Mail or slagged off every day on social media doesn't stop you, what will they do next?
It is a bit 1984.
You came on to calm me down!
I tried.
Yeah. Didn't go well. I think we carry on with this for a bit longer. I can't really bring myself to talk about the uniform policy in boots now. Man, those were the days. Those were the days when all we got excited about was a cautious suggestion on my part that an employer should be allowed to decide whether or not you were allowed tattoos on display while working for them if they pay your wages. Do you remember those happy days when we talked about things like tattoos and dogs in parks having owners who don't clean up after them? This is terrifying. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. Gary has tried and failed to tell the rest of us why we shouldn't worry. Blowhards like me who've spent some of the last few years issuing that utterly fatuous phrase, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear, owe you an apology. But as usual, it'll be the ones who've shouted it loudest that will be the most reluctant to apologise, doubling down, if you will, on the lie. And don't forget also that the people shouting the loudest about freedoms and not being allowed to say stuff, we're now learning are the people who only meant themselves. They don't want anybody else to exercise freedom of speech. Anybody exercising freedom of speech is an enemy of the people now. What if that actual attitude infiltrates government? We'll stay with this for a little bit longer because I don't appear to be the only one who's waking up to this story in a way that probably we should have done previously. It doesn't mean that I'm going to suddenly afford immunity from prosecution to all the prunes who've previously contacted the programme with all manner of conspiracy theories, but the technology, whether by accident or design, to surveil us on a scale that has only really been written about by people like George Orwell and Aldous Huxley, has sort of snuck into our homes without us noticing. It just has. That's what the WikiLeaks story today confirms. Whether or not all of the details contained within these files that have been leaked turn out to be true, the technological reality is such that if you can send something from X to Y, from A to Z, then the people at Z, whoever they are, wherever they are, can probably get hold of stuff that you didn't intend to send, because the lines of communication are open and they're two-way. So, you know, if you can order stuff, if you can call into your sitting room all manner of services, then somebody somewhere probably possesses the ability to call out of your sitting room whatever it is you're saying, whatever it is you're doing, whether they've got a camera or a microphone. And then, of course, we haven't even touched on just being able to observe key taps on keyboards and things like that. And tinfoil hat on, perhaps, temporarily. Does it now look like a coincidence to you that the security services came out earlier this week and revealed that they'd foiled, I think it was 13 terror attacks in recent years? And do you know, because I'm a human being as well as a sort of absurdly rational overthinker, I can live with it up to a point. I do find myself thinking, well, if they're foiling terror attacks, then that, you know, come on, guys, let's not be silly about this. If they're foiling terror attacks. But then you look at the effort that some people are putting into terrorising us. Not the terrorists. No one disagrees about what should happen to them. but all the people who are putting more effort into terrorising us than the actual terrorists are. The politicians, the bloggers, the writers of furious tweets and makers of furious YouTube videos, the kind of people who want us all to be terrified of Sweden at the moment because it's taken in a lot of refugees and has some problems that will be replicated in every country, every city in the world. But no, focus on Sweden. They took in a be terrorised, be terrorised, be terrorised. What happens next? Well, first, we all sort of sign off on them being able to spy on Muslims. Yeah, it's all right. It's only Muslims they're spying on. Okay, Israel bringing in a law that bans people who've professed a political opinion they don't like. It bans them now from visiting the whole country. But the problem is there are people in that country who hold the same opinions. Plenty of people in Israel who've got a problem with the settlements, as they would prefer us to call them, the illegally occupied territories, as you're perfectly entitled to call them under international law. What happens to the people who live in Israel? What happens to Israeli citizens, Jewish Israeli citizens who don't think that they should be illegally occupying territory that historically belongs to Palestinian people? What happens to them? They have to stay silent. Or it's the Stasi. They express an opinion in private that goes against what the government wants. They get rounded up and prosecuted. Ah, dear, oh dear. I wish it was mystery. I'm clocking off early today. You've got the budget coming up at 12. That should cheer you up. Paul's in Streatham. Paul, what would you like to say?
Yeah, good morning.
Hello, Paul.
I sell the type of stuff you're talking about.
What, tellies?
Well, I'm a gadget geek, to be honest.
Oh, so like spy shop type stuff. Are you not becoming redundant then? If all the kit is
no,
good?
I am not.
Good.
To be honest with you, I've always believed that if this stuff has been out for the last 20 odd years plus, if not longer than that, a lot longer than that actually. So I'm quite surprised a lot of people are shocked at what's actually happening now. The only difference is I think since we had the first...
Well, no, let me just clarify. The reason why people are shocked is because 20 odd years ago no one had a smartphone, mate, and you might have been able to buy a tiny little camera and hide it somewhere or get a microphone and attach it to something, but you weren't carrying around in your pocket a portal that would allow people with sinister motives to eavesdrop upon your every move. That's newish.
No, not at that particular time, but it has been out a long time. The only difference is it wasn't used most probably on the public people like us, shall we say, only until we had that first Gulf War and other things started coming into play, and then I think the services decided, right, we need to step up now and move what we've got into the public domain. So
I'm not going to argue with you, and I am going to argue with you, but I'm going to give you plenty of time to respond. Hang on, because these phones, the technology on these phones, it hasn't been put there in order to let them spy on us. It's been put there because it's brilliant. And I can have a pizza delivered to the studio in 20 minutes flat without having to speak to anybody. I can have some headphones delivered before the program is over. What else can I do? Go on, give me something more impressive than just buying stuff. I can access this, I can access that, I can look at that, I can look at this. It's brilliant. I bought it. And then it turns out that it's a two-way street. They didn't give it to us because it was a two-way street.
Most of the companies that are developing microchips and other little bits and pieces are already part of government services, and people like MI5 or the American NSA, these guys have a big part to play in stuff that's developed. This is why people like Tesla and IBM, Apple and Google now, and also Facebook, they're all part of this program that you see now.
Now, look, for the purposes of balance, on any show previous to today's, I would now accuse you of sounding stoned, right?
Why?
Well, because I don't buy the idea that all of these organisations... do they have secret meetings in a big bunker under a volcano?
Well, you obviously don't do a lot of... You don't do a lot of research.
Which is why I said on any show previous to today I would accuse you of sounding stoned. But answer my question, do they have secret meetings in a bunker under a volcano? How do they all get together, these people who are designing new ways to spy on us all the time?
Well, basically, there is I can tell you now that there is a new... That I can tell you now, there is a device that's coming out right now, right? it will bring all smartphones to a complete stop within the next 5 to 7 years. Guaranteed fact. We will no longer be using smartphones.
Yeah, but we're no longer using landlines, mate. That's just progress.
There you go. The iPhones are...
You are sounding stoned. Sorry for saying that.
The iPhones are virtually dead, but listen to me.
Are your hairs like antennae to another dimension?
Basically, there is another dimension coming that a lot of people are going to be very, very shocked about. I won't even sit here and even try to prove a point, because the proof is in the pudding. You will see that these same companies that I am talking about are the same people who are developing...
I think you're a plant. I think you're a secret agent.
It's a guarantee.
I think you come on. You are paid to phone up the radio and sound a bit mad, so that ordinary people stop worrying about this stuff. It's not going to work, mate. I'm still worried.
Listen, why do you think Google are based all the way in a place where it's so far away you wouldn't even know the type of stuff that these guys have developed, and it's not going to be out for the next 5 to 7 years? Let me just repeat
your question back to you. Why do you think Google is based in a place that is so far away you won't even know the kind of stuff they are doing for years? Now, as you hear those words coming back into your own ears, do they make any sense whatsoever?
Yes, it does, because it does make a lot of sense. I'll tell you why it does. Yeah. Because
the proof is in the pudding.
I've done a lot of research on Google, and I've also just recently done a lot of research.
Mate, they'll know all about it.
They do. Listen. Right about now, governments are ploughing billions of pounds into particular researches on the same type of stuff that we are talking about right now.
I have no idea what you're talking about right now.
You're talking about
stuff.
The fact that smartphones can actually spy on people. This has been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
A lot longer than you guys have just brought this up now.
Well, as long as you've had smartphones, the technology has existed to go in both directions. I think you may be... Listen, mate, I think the story today is about evidence that the security services are using it. You're conflating that with...
There's loads of evidence.
No, hang on, mate. You're conflating that with the knowledge that they could. The knowledge that they could is old. The evidence that they have is relatively new.
Oh, well, I wouldn't have thought so.
No, I thought that.
I would never have thought that.
I know, I thought that.
This is what I said to the woman when I called your radio station.
That was no woman. That was a bot.
The lady.
No, it was a bot.
Well, if it was, fair enough.
Yeah.
I said today that I'm surprised that this is a major topic of today, when it should have really been a major topic years ago.
Mm. Because, what do you do to protect yourself from the spies?
That's a very good question. But basically, yes, there are things out there that can actually protect you from people spying on you.
What do you do?
I develop apps. So I would know if my phone's been tapped. I would know if my computer's been tapped. I would definitely know if my smart TV's been tapped.
But you have to be cleverer than the cleverest clever people in Cleverland to be confident that your apps will circumvent their technology.
You've got to have some knowledge of what you're
sound like a good lad, but I don't know if you sound cleverer than the cleverest person in Cleverland.
I'm not the cleverest person in Cleverland, but I'm aware of what's going on, so...
Is anyone listening to this phone call?
No, not at this particular moment. The only people that are listening are your viewers, even if
half of them have probably switched off. How do you know that nobody is listening to this phone call?
Even if it's been tapped, it wouldn't bother me, because it's what I'm telling you is a guaranteed fact. It's not, none of it that I'm telling you is actual fiction.
But how do you know? How do you know that they're not watching you at this precise moment?
It wouldn't. I've got nothing to hide, so it wouldn't bother me.
What about all that secret research you were doing into Google, Paul?
Well, the research, there's nothing wrong with people doing research. It's good to have research.
What have you found out that they wouldn't want you to know?
It's good to have knowledge of what's going on.
What have you found out that you wouldn't want them to know that you know?
What have I found out that they wouldn't want me to know that I know? Oh, well, let me tell you guys this now. This one's going to most probably blow your mind.
Yeah, go on then.
But Google,
that'll make two of us.
Google have developed and I'm sure you've basically heard this in the grapevine in the past. Google have developed a little army of robots, and it's a whole load of them as well. Basically, taking away physical soldiers on the ground. Now, this is a new development that has been in the making for the last 5 years, which people do not know about.
But if they don't want you to know that, you probably shouldn't have just revealed that you know it.
But I have, because I know it's been in the making, and sometimes people need to be aware. It's just like WikiLeaks. That's what WikiLeaks do. They keep the public aware of what's going on. So sometimes it's not always good to be sitting in the dark and then all of a sudden getting a big surprise.
Mate, you're right. Have you got my back, mate?
I've always got your back. I'm always on LBC.
You're the man. It's 11:16. If you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. Did you know, I don't know what you're learning at the moment about the world in which we live together. I'm learning that as a species we'd never learn anything. There used to be little meaningless platitudes, or even meaningful platitudes, didn't they? Things like those who do not learn from history are condemned forever to repeat it. And you'd sort of throw them out as not game changers or game enders, but just as kind of, pertinent contributions to the national pageant. And that Benjamin Franklin quote about those who are prepared to sacrifice their liberty on the altar of their security or in protection of their security deserve neither. It sounds really clever. Really clever. Not really. I don't know quite what he means, but it's something to do with not letting the authorities go through your knicker drawer. Yeah, very clever. If you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear would be the response to that. You say, well, what are you worried about? What have you got to hide? What have you got to fear? You learn nothing. You look at that checklist in the Holocaust Museum in DC, the signs of fascism, and you watch how the President of the United States of America is not just ticking them off one by one, probably not through his own agency, but through the influence of some of his advisors. And you completely realise, I thought that Nazi Germany was some sort of aberration in the history of humanity, something that would almost be explained by a chemical influence being put in the water, something that was so at odds with what I thought humanity was, that I always discussed it in the same way that I would discuss an experiment in a Petri dish. It was so alien to my experience, realising that it isn't anymore, realising how easily these fascistic tides can rise, has taught me a lot. Most of it very depressing, obviously, but it's given me a better understanding of all sorts of issues. Everything from anti-Semitism and the what's the word I'm looking for? What I found quite discomforting, the speed with which some people would reach for the anti-Semitism card to close down any criticism of behaviours or policies. I get it a lot better now, because you knew as a Jewish person, your family legacy is to know how easily these demons rise within us, within our societies, not foreign forces massing on our shores, but your neighbours. So I understand a lot better now. I still find it discomforting and inappropriate and wrong to reach for the anti-Semitism card whenever anybody criticises Israel. But my God, I've got a lot more sympathy for that position. Now I know from the evidence of my own eyes how easy it is for people you live alongside to foster fascistic tendencies, to think that we should be rounding people up according to what they believe. Newspapers that I've written for describing High Court judges as enemies of the people, describing former prime ministers as treacherous, describing a pop singer as somehow being responsible for Brexit's failure if it all goes wrong because she tweets about how daft so much of it is. These are the moods and attitudes that get fed by fascists and get turned into murderous rampages, pogroms and lynchings. They just are. I don't think we're going to go down that road, but now, for the first time in my life, I know what the first few steps down that road look like, because they're being taken by people I know. It's incredible. And that's why the story about the security services having access to our innermost privacy is so jarring and so upsetting and so potentially frightening, because the people who've spent the last few years banging on about freedom and how they're not allowed to say what they want to say and nobody's allowed to do this and nobody's allowed to do that, they are the people that desperately want to shut down everybody else's freedoms. That is another hallmark of fascistic progress. You pretend you're a victim. Oh, I'm a victim. Oh, the media hate me. Well, hang on a minute. How come everyone knows the media hates you unless it's you telling the media that this is true and the media reporting it? Because they don't hate you. They're providing you with it. Doesn't matter. So you get that narrative of victimhood out there. Then you find someone to blame for it. Muslims, immigrants. And slowly it all coalesces. The planets align. And anybody who stands up and says, actually... Just to take Lord Lawson as an example. Lord Lawson, one of the Leave campaigners, I think he chaired one of the campaigns, and he, the main campaign, said categorically at the time, they need us more than we need them. And in the House of Lords yesterday, he stated, again, categorically, we're probably going to come away with no deal at all. Those are polar opposite positions, I think. Yeah, anybody who points it out now, enemy of the people, shut him down, silence him, stone her. I'm just pointing out facts. What's wrong with pointing out facts? Ask Donald Trump, who makes up his own. Yesterday, it was 122 dangerous people had been released by Barack Obama from Guantanamo Bay. He's kind of right. There were 9. Gone back to fighting in the Middle East. He said 122. The fact is there were 9. 113 were released by George W. Bush, but that doesn't suit Trump's narrative at the moment, so he writes 122. You stand up and say, that's not true. You're an enemy of the people. You're fake news. You're lying media. It's not even complicated or sinister, but I think the lesson I've learned this year is how many people like it that way. How many people like to swallow the untruths because it's uncomplicated to believe a lie. It's really complicated to try to work out what's true and what isn't. Pick a prejudice, double down on it, and then vote for the politician that endorses it. How on earth has British and American news sites become obsessed with sexual assault statistics in Sweden? There are over 1,000 rapists on the loose, suspected rapists on the loose in this country right now. Between 2 and 3 women in Britain are killed every day as victims of abuse, usually by someone they know. And every single time I get a tweet or a text or even read an article by someone banging on about how awful Sweden is, I immediately consult their contributions to conversations about domestic violence in this country, about rape statistics in this country, about sexual assault in this country. Guess what? Unless it was committed by a Muslim, they just don't care. So if you've got that mindset out there, and it's not just minority now, it's going mainstream, this mad, manipulated, completely brainwashed mindset out there, and then you find out that the authorities possess the ability to listen into you whenever they want. And then you sort of think not of Nazi Germany, but of East Germany post-war. And the Stasi rounding people up, parents, children grassing on their parents for holding inappropriate views, for holding disloyal views, for holding treacherous opinions. And then you read George Orwell. Don't read George Orwell. Lisa's in Crowborough. Lisa, what's going on?
Hi, James. Thank you for having me on the programme. I was just going to come at it from 2 angles, actually. And the first was the case of the boy in Leeds who stabbed his school teacher.
Yes.
Yes, you recall that. Well, apparently there was a documentary on. He was on social media for 2 years using words like hate, knives, planning her death, and it was never picked up.
I think planning her death might be a step too far.
No, he did.
Okay.
There was a documentary literally about 2 weeks ago about it, and he literally put all of this was on Facebook, how he absolutely hated her. Yeah, he wanted the day to come that she died. So anyway, I won't go on about it, but that's just...
Well, I'll tell you why you shouldn't go on about it, because he posted that publicly, so you're perfectly entitled to say it should have been picked up on, but if we picked up on every mad teenager who's posting horrible stuff about their teachers and other human beings, the police would have no time to do anything else. And by putting it on Facebook...
Do you not think
hang on a minute. By putting it on Facebook... Hang on, please hang on. By putting it on Facebook, he published it. We're talking about private, secret conversations and exchanges that you don't know could be viewed by other people. Facebook is called social media for a reason. It's a public posting that other people can see. We're talking about things you think are secret being visible and viewable and accessible to others, be they authorities or elsewhere.
Surely if something as public as that is not picked up on,
No, you're comparing apples with oranges. I could read you a tweet now from one of my trolls that would trigger the same words you've just triggered, but it's being published. It's not a secret conversation that's being eavesdropped on, Lisa. What was your second point?
My second point was myself and my husband, we were very unfortunately lost our son in 2011. He was killed at school.
Oh, my God.
And, a very well-known private school in Sussex.
Oh, my God.
We took legal action against the school because the circumstances surrounding his death, obviously it was a massive shock, and we weren't, in the initial stages, I was so traumatised that I wasn't in the whole of my senses, but from the get-go, I wasn't happy with the way first the news was broken to me.
I hear you. I can't dispute. I'm not going to argue with you about anything. I'm just merely going to observe that eavesdropping on private conversations is not the same as failing to act properly on things that had been publicly published. But given what
this is a different point.
Go on.
The point I was going to make about this was we very quickly realised that the school wanted to kind of close down any kind of means that we had of accessing what actually went on that day. And anyway, there was a whole thing going on about it, but they very quickly took myself and my husband off the emailing list for the school parents, but also my son had he was on a school portal where he fed information into it.
Yes.
And all the information that happened in the school throughout the day was fed into that portal, and I had access to it. And within about 2 days of my son being killed, they remotely went on and removed everything off the portal.
Yeah, this is awful. And if there's anything I can do to help you, I will do it. Get in touch with me off air, and if you need any sort of media string pulling or whatever it may be, I'll do it. But it embarrasses me to say this to you. It's got nothing to do with what we're talking about today.
Say that we felt the long arm of the law, and if there was. And in the whole legal process, which took 4 years, because this was back in 2011,
yes,
we literally felt every single legal road we tried to go down was just closed down. And if there is a way that somebody can spy on your emails or spy on your internet, because my husband...
They can already. We knew about that. This is about people being able to listen through your television without you knowing. But I'll say it again. I completely understand how you've seen similarities between the tragedy that you've endured, that no one would wish on their worst enemies, and the conversation we're having today, which is substantively different. But I mean it. If there's anything that a low-ranking media troublemaker can do to help you, then please get in touch and ask me, and I will. But in terms of technology in our pocket that intelligence services can listen to, it's a different ball game altogether. It's 11:32. Budget on the way later today. We'll be bringing you our characteristically comprehensive coverage. I don't know whether you consider that good news or bad news. Ditto the next piece of information. I'll be clocking off early and handing over the reins of power to Sheila Fogarty at 12 noon today. She'll be down at the Houses of Parliament, canvassing reaction and input from a dizzying array of experts and politicians, among them Theo Usherwood, LBC's political editor, who joins me on the line now. You know me, Theo, I'm a cynical old soul. When the story about grammar schools appeared yesterday, there was a little bit of me that thought, day before the budget, that's the bit they've given to the newspapers. What could it all mean?
Yes, £320 million for free schools and grammar schools, but it belies the fact that we are going to see a reduction in the way many schools are funded, particularly in urban areas, places like London, with some schools facing budget cuts running into double digits by the end of this Parliament. And head teachers in many schools have been urging their parents to write to their local MP to protest about this. Of course, the feeling is amongst those head teachers and unions that the government has used the prospect of more grammar schools to divert everybody's attention away from the fact that many state schools, local authority run schools will suffer budget cuts. In terms of other headline announcements we can expect today, £1.3 million for social care. That's been well documented.
1.3 million?
A billion, sorry. Apologies.
Very important zero, that, Theo.
Don't put me in charge of any spreadsheets. The big one to listen out for is, of course, business rates. We're expecting a boost to the contingency fund to help small businesses cope with the rise in rates as their properties are revalued. And the question is, how will the Chancellor pay for all this? He has a £60 billion Brexit war chest. Of course, growth has been upgraded on the last autumn statement, but he's made it clear that he doesn't want to dip into that pot. Rather, he wants to save it for Brexit itself. He's a cautious Chancellor as he anticipates a rocky road ahead, and he's going to have to find all the money to pay for all of this from elsewhere. And of course, the government has committed not to, and Theresa May's government has committed not to increasing VAT or income tax. So they're going to have to look at other areas, and that's going to be the story, I think, this afternoon. A death tax has been floated to pay for social care, and of course it's sunk like a stone on the Tory backbenches. There isn't a huge amount of political capital with the Brexit bill going back to the House of Commons. They're not looking to start any fires this afternoon, so they're going to have to find some other way to, as Lord Lawson put it, pluck the goose without too much hissing.
Very nice phrase. Speaking of Lord Lawson, his intervention in the Brexit debate last night in the House of Lords, of course, appeared to signal a complete reverse ferret from his insistence during campaigning that the EU needs us more than we need them. He now mooted the very real possibility of us being sort of sent away from those negotiations with no deal at all, or walking away, I suppose, depending on your perspective. Talk to me about this notion of Philip Hammond having to accrue some sort of war chest to cope with the impact of the Brexit that the Brexit campaigners told us wouldn't have any impact at all upon the British economy.
Philip Hammond, James, is seen in Westminster, as I said, known as Spreadsheet Phil, as being a rather boring
Is he
character.
really known as Spreadsheet Phil, Theo? That seems unlikely to me.
We're being dubbed as Spreadsheet Phil.
It's not like
Phil,
Dirty Gertie from Number 30, is it? It doesn't exactly trip off the here comes old Spreadsheet Phil. Anyway, carry on.
Boring is good at the moment. We have a lot of excitement with our plans to leave the European Union, and he is seen as a safe pair of hands. He is actually viewed, and has been viewed by his colleagues in the Conservative Party, as a Eurosceptic. He went into the Foreign Office, and many Tory backbenchers felt that he turned native, and seeing the Foreign Office as very Europhile, and came out with his head turned towards the benefits of the European Union. Went into number 11. He goes back to by-elections in East London when Theresa May was fighting by-elections in South West London at the same time during the early 90s. So he has a long relationship with the Prime Minister, dating back more than 20 years, but seen as more of a realist about what Brexit will mean, and therefore this budget in a way reflects that, in that he is putting money aside for the rainy day when which he thinks will come down when he thinks it will pour with rain in 2018-19 2019-20 when we in fact leave the European Union. And that we actually to the point we're at now, we haven't actually triggered Article 50. We haven't actually left the European Union. We've got 2 years of negotiations to go through, and once we actually do leave the European Union, he is predicting trouble ahead, setting aside this pot of money to perhaps prop up the economy if and when there is a downturn as a result of leaving the EU. And
of course, we find ourselves in that curious situation of the people who didn't campaign for it being responsible for addressing and fixing any potential problems that do accrue, and the people who told us there wouldn't be any problems strangely sort of absent from the scene. Although Michael Heseltine, of course, said yesterday that when he heard David Davis, Boris Johnson and Liam Fox campaigning to leave the European Union, he naively thought they would know what that would look like.
Yes, he did. He was on LBC today. Lord Heseltine has, and it's an interesting one because he didn't have to be sacked by Theresa May. He could have kept his job advising the government on infrastructure, but his dissension in a national newspaper column, and then again in the House of Lords last night, his speech, it was an emotional speech, it was an impassioned speech asking for peers to support a motion which would in effect critics, Theresa May said, would incentivise EU leaders to block, to give us a bad deal.
But which most objective observers describe as affording Parliament the true sovereignty that it should exercise over such an important epoch-making matter. But the Commons have voted not to employ their sovereignty. The Lords have voted to make them employ it, and then Theresa May's complaining.
Yes, Lord Forsyth said that it would, in effect, he was for a Conservative peer who supported Theresa May, said it would, in effect, make Parliament party to the negotiations with those EU leaders, and therefore it had to be down to the executive, and Parliament couldn't be involved. But Lord Heseltine lost his job last night. He was informed that he wasn't going to be able to stay on advising the government, and it feeds into this idea that Theresa May, the Prime Minister, doesn't like dissension. Critics are banished, and she only perhaps wants to hear from those who say yes.
Thank you very much, Theo. We've got to head towards you've got a very busy afternoon coming up. Theo Usherwood there, live from, what do we call it? Is it Westminster Green? Is it Parliament? What's it called? College Green. Like, you know, the bit of lawn outside the House of Commons. 10 minutes to handover. Who are you handing over to? Sheila Fogarty. Why? It's budget day and they bring in the grown-ups. Sheila, what can we look forward to?
They do bring it. It's true. I've stolen an hour of your life, of your programme. What we can look forward to is, of course, as Theo was saying a few moments ago, Philip Hammond's first budget as Chancellor. Events since George Osborne's final budget. He tweeted his good wishes, by the way, to the Chancellor, but events since then have been quite extraordinary, haven't they? Different Prime Minister, different Chancellor, arguably a different country post-Brexit, so we'll reflect on all of that, really. I don't think we can help but, because it will be running through everything we find out over the next few hours. We'll hear from MPs, we'll hear from economists, business people from around the UK as well, self-employed people, landlords and the like. We'll hear from the Mayor of London just before 4, and the thing that I'm most looking out for this afternoon is exactly what will be on offer to the social care sector, so we'll speak to a representative from there as well. It's getting sunny here now, which is a relief, but my feet are still in 3 inches of mud and I forgot my wellies.
Happy days. Keep an eye on Theo Usherwood, Sheila. He tried to pass $1 billion off as $1 million on this programme 10 minutes ago. These are the kind of glitches you can't have on budget day.
That's boys for you. Thank God it's International Women's Day.
Thank God it is. And, it's nice to hear it properly marked on LBC. 11:52 is the time. That schools bit in the budget, you got to look out for that, because I know I sometimes sound like a stuck record. Sometimes, what happens when they reduce in some areas the budget cuts to schools? It's the head teachers that are sending out the warnings now to right across the country. There's one head teacher down in Sussex who's described it in the most awful of terms. So you sit here as an ordinary citizen and think, no, they can't be taking money out of schools. Everyone agrees we need to be putting we can't. I mean, the worst case scenario is we leave it as it is. We can't actually be taking money out of individual schools, which are already struggling. But as I've said to you a gazillion times, once you've let that immigration genie out of the bottle, you can do whatever you want to ordinary working people. What's that? You're going to actually remove teachers from my kid's school? Yeah, just get cross about that for 10 minutes, then I'll whisper in your ear that it's because of all the Polish children, and you'll believe me, and you won't get cross with the right people anymore. You'll get cross with the Polish children, or their parents, and the people that have actively passed legislation to remove money from your child's school's budget. They get off scot-free. It's wonderful. It's like the mother of all jokers, immigration. £7 billion is the net contribution of migrant workers in this country to the economy. £7 billion, better off than we would be if they weren't here. But when they remove funding from schools, so you'll probably hear someone on this radio station saying that it's all about immigration. All about immigration. Happy days. And actually, I can't even go down that road at the moment. I haven't got time. 11:53. Back to scrutiny. Back to security services. Back to reality. Ellis is in Wilmslow. Ellis, what would you like to say?
Hey, James. I hope you're well. I mean, to be honest with you, with regard to, I know obviously the government has the Snoopers Charter, so I want to make 2 points. First point is on, obviously, the Snoopers Charter and the fact that the government can read whatever the heck they like. I actually don't particularly mind that notion.
No, we're not talking about the stuff they tell us, are we? We're talking about the stuff they don't tell us. That's why it's a leak rather than a charter.
But let's face it, right? There are 50 million people in the United Kingdom. Why would they read mine? And if you really want to read what I'm doing, which is telling my mate that we're going to go and get drunk tonight...
It's almost as if you didn't hear what I just said. We're not talking about the powers that they've publicised and told us about. We're talking about the powers that they don't publicise and tell us about.
Well, let me go into my second point, which is that if you actually think of what Apple as a company know about you, or Android, or whatever phone you've got, They know your fingerprint, your location, what you're saying, your account numbers, your passwords, your bank.
Well, no, they don't, because it's encrypted, so they can't access this information just from your phone.
Donald Trump wanted the encryption codes for all Apple phones in America, didn't he?
It wasn't Donald Trump. It was the FBI after I think it was the Florida terror attack, wasn't it?
No, sorry, yeah, you're right.
And Apple refused to give up the information, and a lot of people were very cross about that. Now I think we can see why that was quite a brave intervention, although it's probably just a matter of time before they can. So you're here to tell me that because you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear?
No, what I'm actually saying is at the moment I'm not particularly concerned, but I do obviously think about it. I mean, to be honest with you, there is a world of terrorism at the moment, and look, if it stops me getting shot, then so be it. I'd rather be alive and someone read my emails and be shot.
Yes, you are saying, this is quite a surreal exchange, you are saying that because you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear, and you are prepared to surrender your liberties on the altar of what the authorities tell you is your security. I completely respect your position. Do you hold any controversial views?
I do hold some controversial views, yeah.
For example?
Go on stage today.
Why not? You've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. What's your most controversial view?
Let's not go into that today, but no.
No, but it's very important that we go into that today, because tomorrow I could have you rounded up and locked up for it. So what is your most controversial view, Mr. I've got nothing to hide, therefore nothing to fear?
I've not nothing that controversial. And nothing.
Well, tell me then.
Why would someone want to read mine?
Tell me then.
Well, I personally think that we should reduce immigration to probably.
It's not controversial. I don't believe you. That's not controversial at all. You've got people given radio shows who hold more controversial views than that. I'm going to stick a microphone in your sitting room without telling you, because I think you're hiding something.
Fine. Okay. Stick a microphone in my living room. I don't mind.
Okay. And a camera.
If you really want to, you can see.
And now you're just weird. Paul's in the Wirral. Paul, what would you like to say?
James, unfortunately, that previous caller's view isn't all that uncommon.
Not until he actually does have a camera he doesn't know in his sitting room, and then he gets a knock on the door saying, I believe you've been smoking cannabis, or I believe you've been viewing inappropriate pornography, or I believe that you've been expressing political opinions that the new government doesn't like, and then they realise why it was a silly thing to wave through.
I fully agree with that, mate. I think it was Glenn Greenwald in response to surveillance in a similar in response to like a similar attitude.
Yes.
Ask someone to write down all their email addresses and passwords if it didn't matter, and just give them to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Saving TV2. But I was ringing up just about public opinion towards surveillance, because it's actually the topic of my PhD thesis at the moment.
God, the callers we're getting at the moment, eh? It's like the brains trust.
I'm using social media comments from Facebook, from news articles, UK-based news providers, on articles related to terrorist threats to the UK, and from that I've subcategorized 6 different categories, and one of them is domestic surveillance law.
Really?
And I've only it's early days. I've only just actually started.
I've only got a minute left, so give me the juice.
Well, pretty much the very top one, depressingly enough, so far theme that comes up quite often is I've got nothing to fear, I've got nothing to hide, as a positive towards it. There is negatives, but unfortunately in terms of numbers so far it's dwarfed by the whole.
Which is how you end up with a secret police, isn't it? Because people think, and the first thing you do is scapegoat. So you say, no, they won't be you, mate, you'll be fine in Wilmslow, it's just Muslims they're going to be spying on, and then suddenly they're spying on everyone. I mean, it's a bit apocalyptic. You're not going to emigrate just yet, are you, Paul?
Not just yet, but there are people on these comments that say they would. But just before, but my final point is, people don't really. People would happily give up privacy, but as a human right, on that article, the other half of it is privacy and family life. Would they willingly?
No, you've made your point. We've already gone a little bit over. It's an important day for LBC. Sheila Fogarty about to harness her budget coverage. That's it from me for another day. We'll do it again tomorrow from 10.